Hi, everybody. Confidence. Good to be with you. Happy New Year, and thank you for your support. So I'm going to pick up on these two excellent questions that Mandy asked in the comments. So thanks for those. Partially, the one question is how can you tell apart, like when are you channeling and what's your imagination, and how do you experientially tell these two things apart? And then the second one is how do you tune into these specific frequencies? So excellent questions. Now just share my own experiences with this. So partially imagination is something like the funnel through which the content of, let's call it the unconscious, or the great undivided, or something enters into your mind. So this is where creativity or inspiration, these things come from. And that's essentially what we mean when we say that we're all channeling all the time. It's this idea that the creativity is always there, but usually what's being funneled through it and into real life is are the codes, the preoccupations, the content of everyday life. So it's these self-perpetuating cycles, and that's kind of the idea that, well, then your inspiration, or your creative powers are um, sort of tied to the project of what's for dinner, or what do I do to organize the next holiday, or I need to plan this out, or there's a problem at my job, or what do I think is wrong with the world today, or something like these fairly mundane things that we probably all know that we'll usually get preoccupied with if we don't actively kind of steer ourselves towards other problems. Or of course there are also people who have like very pertinent real life problems, right? So that's of course what arrests their attention. But kind of, if you are in the privileged situation to be able to have um some time, some space, some room to be able to um, unleash some of your creativity, right? Address your imagination, cultivate it, letting it out, then you are essentially channeling. And what you do then is often that you just receive inspiration from a deeper part of you. So what you're channeling is essentially a deeper frequency, because it becomes something that comes more from the level of your soul, in lack of a better word, right? So this is where sort of artistic inspiration arises. This is where do these ideas come from? They kind of permeate, bubble up from some kind of layer, and then into consciousness, where we can grab them, take hold of them, and then begin to express them through the channels, the media that are natural to us. So that's kind of the idea, to take a very broad approach to where these ideas, inspirations may come from. Because then, of course, I had the experience, which I think is pretty common, that these entities I began communicating with, they kind of made themselves present in meditation. And from that state, it's fairly obvious to know, because if you're kind of in a deep, cleared state where you're simply managing to notice your thoughts, and the thoughts arise with quite a lot of space in between, and then sort of the presence of something alien, weird, strange, otherly, will seem very pronounced, and be something that kind of does this. And I assume you have these experiences in meditation too, where if you manage to still your mind, then often your mind will at some point be carried away by something that seems very pertinent, and that might be like inner inspiration, or resolution to problem, conflict, something in your life, or it might be like this sense of something reaching out to you and contacting you. and and these are, let's say, fairly remarkable, fairly distinct, very pronounced, hard to miss ways of coming in contact with these entities. But then when I channel them, I have the experience. The deep breath I take is essentially me shifting into another state of consciousness. So in that way, I do have the sort of light switch experience of, okay, now something else is going on. And also because I feel like I'm observing what is going on while it's going on. But at the same time, it's streaming through my mind, so I'm feeling like these beings, or like a human interpretation of what these beings feel like as I express them, which is part of why it's also so fun for me channeling these high vibrational entities. And um, and that is also, that can be a little tricky because I can feel like a lot of the information when they're retrieving it feels like it's something that is known, and it's not necessarily that I know it, but they can be a little hard to tell apart. And what I often did in the beginning, in particular, was I would tape myself, and I still do that, right, and then play it back and listen to it. And so it's very distinct for me that these things aren't things that I would say, and often the thoughts and inner visions that accompany them are things that are very, very different from my inner imagery and inner normal consciousness. So in that sense, it's just, I'm not essentially, I think more about the history of philosophy and stuff. So like the very fact that like I'm getting information about, I don't know, weird plant formations in strange alien environments on other planets, or like stuff of that character, Lyran spaceships and things like that are very distinct to me. That like, where is this coming from? It is at least coming from a layer of consciousness that I don't actively have access to. So that's a way of distinguishing it. And then like these inner visions are very reminiscent of, wouldn't necessarily say dream visions, but uh, dreams where I feel the level of significance has been quite high. So I had the experience the other day, just lying down on my back for a while, of kind of having this. Torians take me to their spaceships, like of having this kind of spiritual surgery performed on me, and there was a very distinct like pink light in that experience, surrounded by these outlines or energetic figures. Um, while they're clearing my energy body. And this like traveling pink light was just of a, it had a vividness to it, a sort of clarity, just of a deep color to it that I usually wouldn't conjure up in my own inner vision. So often it's also like they actually seem in that way higher vibration or higher resolution, almost now in Technicolor, right? So in that way, that's a way to distinguish it. And then I often have also the experience that the entities they enter right and they exit left. So if I'm kind of feeling like, if I'm meditating or something, I'm getting messages that they're coming from over here, and if something is kind of exiting, it's leaving to the left. And when I'm channeling, it usually feels kind of like a link up, like a Ethernet or something, right? So just like this feeling that there's a kind of tube up into um, sort of a great plasmatic field of energy, where this information is being beamed down and then projected forward. And this is kind of where I'm seated managing that. And then the consciousness and yeah, the interpersonal, the interface, is then operating with making this energy accessible in the human sphere through my body, mind, gesture, speech, right? Like all these things, the channeling. So those are um, those are very much the hallmarks of how I experience it. And then I think perhaps that the last and most distinct thing, which has been, it just keeps accumulating over the years, is that the trances seem to become deeper. So I recall less and less of the content coming out of it, and if then, talking about it after the session, or it'll turn up in a glimpse or replaying a recording or something, and it will feel like remembering a dream, which is of course like a weird experience, right? You can't remember a dream, but that's how it feels like to me, like I'm remembering something I dreamt, and then I'm like present watching a recording of the dream, being reminded of it, which of course is also just a sign to me that the state of mind I'm in um, is more reminiscent of a twilight state than anything else, and that's sort of the markers. I hope that was noticeable. So my best encouragement is to kind of go with it and just experience how it comes out of you, how you react to it. What is your resonance to experiencing that recording? That's incredibly helpful. And can you sort of recognize yourself in it, or it seems like there's something else at play? And then the frequency range. Question number two. Incredibly interesting because it's very intuitive, and I think for most channelers, it seems to be that there is a type of opening period. I've also been instrumental, just as I discovered channeling, and then it kind of became activated as something I was drawn to. I've also been instrumental in at least two people I know who've like sought me out, felt they resonated with my content, and then that has sort of been the jump off point for them beginning to channel themselves. So it seems that there is this kind of activation taking place in people's energy fields, or higher selves, unconscious, whatever you want to call it, that lies beyond consciousness, where it's kind of meant to happen. That's my intuition around it. That people are called to this content in one way or another, and um, and that means there is this opening phase where often people feel like there are entities contacting them. There are special counterparts coming forward, one or more, and then they kind of work with them and move more into this stabilization of this new skill and this new work. And I can sort of still pick up a tool chest from my tool chest. Like if you want to scan the frequency field and then find a weird frequency and see what that says. But it's not, it's something I have to do consciously, where in the beginning it just seemed like they came to me, these entities, in this very opening energetic phase. But what I do now is, so the idea is again this entire plasma, and it's kind of the idea that the entirety of the cosmos is both the very, very, very smallest thing you can imagine, and the totality of everything. Just kind of a weird paradox, but that's the hologrammatic nature of the universe, and this means that everything that is just somehow present as a frequency, as a as just a hunch or something that you can pick up with, the outer reaches, the perimeters of your mind, is something that you can then tune to unwrap and then amplify into your own existence. And this is channeling. And usually, again, it's because just pick up the frequencies from our everyday realities, right? So I'll do what I did yesterday, or something, and that's the frequency I'll unwrap. But out here, there is a broad mass of frequencies coming in. And the idea is essentially to understand, not only think of yourself, essentially understand this is the reality, that your physical body is a condensation of a much, much wider structure that is embedded, like it is like these crystalline mandala like wheels of rotation, where the layers are more and more eternal, and you're already existing in those layers, and they are invisible to you, but you're not invisible to them. So in that sense, it's kind of you just lifting your gaze, being able to move into that state of stillness, or the altered state, and then lifting your gaze metaphorically, or your vibration to that specific frequency. And that is often something you can pick up through others. Like, notice these hybrid program counterparts, right? That it seems also like that then people come in contact with their own counterpart, or with these Arcturians, where it's like a lot of people channel them, and then I pick up the frequency from other channelers, where it's like it's in their energy field, because it's already surrounding you, it's already dripping into this reality. It's just invisible, and the only reason it's invisible is because it's the frequency grid that you're channeling normally is outside of the range of these. And if you just shift a little bit, then it can begin, then you can sort of pull that into your reality, and it begins to affect it. And that's essentially the trick of channeling these entities. And toning is then the best way to do it. And this is very intuitive. But what you could do is you could look up the star, Sirius or Arcturus, or some of these more famous entities we are in contact with, right? And then just feel like, what is the tone of the light that this is giving on? How does this light feel? What does it speak to in my body? And with Arcturus, it would be now just toning into their frequency energy, but that would be, I feel it very much here. So it's essentially this sense that then you're expanding this part of your energy field, and this becomes the clear frequency that they're then allowed to move in and connect to the space where you sort of enmesh your energy, alchemize it, let's call it that, to alchemize your energy, and then the channeling experience can happen, because then you can translate this content. And it is, of course, a human, a very, very human translation, right? We're communicating with like species of a much higher intelligence layer that exists as thought forms in infinity at the present moment, and also come from different systems. So of course, like, what we can translate from them are things that are sensible to us. But I find it amazing how much we can actually contain of their information, how much we can take in and make sense of, and use as our own. And then that their frequencies are just so loving. So they're also quite compelling lodestars in the idea of just a vision of who we can be, and how we can exist as a species. So I hope that answered some of the questions, and I hope that was kind of an interesting technical manual in response to the questions. So have fun with the toning and attuning out there, and just remember, you can't go wrong. You're always channeling, and your guides are always connected to you. So much love to you guys.